Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Irish Food Trade Connect conversations. I'm so delighted to have Teresa Phelan with me here today. Teresa is an expert in her field and has done significant work for the Irish drinks on the export part in the US. I'm going to apologize now because there's some sort of a dinging going on my phone. So as these things go live, I think the Zoom is dinging at me and I'm on it. So apologies for that. So, Teresa, you're very, very welcome here today, and thanks for joining me and agreeing to join me.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Really excited to be here and big fan of the Irish food trade conversations. I think conversations are how you build business, especially in such a small industry like the Irish food and drink industry, and even globally. So
It
really,
it is, isn't it true? And I think that the more, I would have met you first through working with you in Bord Bia, and I never seen such a woman to, to go out and do a job and get it done. So I probably clicked with you that way and that way. So I respect highly what you do. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the industry anyway, first day.
I suppose I'd say a lot of people in the food and drink industry. I grew up on a farm. My father's involved in the meat industry. We would have been very much meat from the butchers kind of a family. We always were kind of taught the importance and value of Irish food and the quality. Ever before I ever went into marketing, I knew, we had something really special in Ireland, and just from what I consumed at home. And then formally, I ended up in UCC. I did economics first, and I was very fortunate. The Food Business and Innovation Masters, its first year was launched when I was ready to go, and I joined that. And that was an incredible experience because it was a lot of industry leaders like Joe Bogue, who they've been consulting and they've been working in industry for a long time. So it was very practical. You were doing projects for businesses every week as part of your learning. Out of that, I did a placement with the Little Milk Company, who sure everyone's familiar with them, but they're the kind of they're the value add brand of the Irish organic farmers of Ireland. So it's a wonderful cheese brand, and I basically did everything there. I got a baptismal fire in the best way possible.
Can
So
imagine.
I was their first employee outside of their direct owners. So we did all sales, marketing, business development. I did the packaging, I did the compliance. So I can look at the back of a cheese now, and I can tell you, on most products actually, and I can tell you whether it's right or wrong or what should be there or how you would change it. I was really fortunate with that brand because they were kind of ahead of their time with the likes of partnerships. I would have got to work with great companies like O'Donnell's Crisp, with Ballymaloo, and we would have done a lot of kind of food pairings with the cheese. So I would have worked with the Teeling Whiskey Company, and actually from there, then I applied to the IBEC program and was really lucky to get a placement with Teeling Whiskey in Chicago on that program. So I was their first person in the Midwest, and that's where I fell in love with the Irish drinks industry. So I started to it was at the very beginning. It was 2016. It was, Teelings had just built their distillery. They were kind of the first new cool kid on the block in a long time. And I really got to learn from a family who'd obviously, been in the industry their whole lives. John Teeling is some would say, grandfather of Irish whiskey. And I was inspired both by the provenance and then kind of the new contemporary direction they were taking the industry. I was in Chicago with them for 2 years, traveling all over the Midwest, in back of beyond Midwest. And anyone who spent time in the US will know that that's true America. That's what you hear when you hear on TV, real America. That's real America. So that was fabulous. It was business development. It was brand education. And always, as you're kind of working in the US, it's always selling Ireland. No matter what product you're selling Ireland because it's, a product coming from Ireland. And then following that, got my job in Bord Bia, which was my life for the past 5 years. And I absolutely loved every second of it. I think I joined at the perfect time. I was the first person to be ever dedicated to drinks outside of the sector manager, who was initially Denise Murphy, and then that team grew to Michael Jacob and Michael Hussey. I'm sure a lot of people here are lucky enough to have worked with them along the way. And it was when the US team was being built out. So I was one of three new permanent staff. So it grew from one to three. And I spent 5 years just working with all their, wonderful distilleries and wonderful brands, and really doing everything from, it was kind of two sides of the coin, advising them on strategy, giving them market insights, helping them to truly understand how to win in the US and Canadian market, and then also building those really strong relationships with the key players in the supply chain along the way in the US and Canada. And yeah, I just absolutely loved every second of it.
Wow, it's some wealth of knowledge, Teresa.
Yeah, I was
Some wealth.
blessed get so young,
Yeah.
like young in my career, and I spent so much personal like time. You're bringing buyers to Ireland who are the major buyers and large retailers, but you're spending 5 hours on a bus with them, so you're talking about their kids, and you're really building those real relationships, which meant I can still pick up the phone to them now, where they might send me a text. I converted a lot of them to Murphy's when they came, so I often get a picture of them buying cans of Murphy's in Trader Joe's in America now, because they're all buying it. So it's lovely to kind of see those long lasting relationships.
It like you've touched on a couple of things there, and I think your experience, your first experience with the Irish Little Milk Company and the collaboration of brands. Because last week there it was I seen that Rye River Brewing have put their beer into Green Isle, into the Donegal catch. And that I think that's what this industry is about, that collaboration of operators together, cross-sectional, cross categories. And to say that that business were involved in that so early, and then that took you on to into Teelings, where, to be honest, they have driven such a business model, like such a like I mean, the experience you have is real round up experience, you know, and that then going into Bord Bia, I'd say was a complete, because you have that kind of private sector where one day you could be, packing the stuff, the next day some people are
Literally, yeah.
sitting into a car or a van, that sort of way.
Yeah.
So that must have really stood to you, I'd say, did it?
I think and I kind of take this into every role. And I was very lucky to be in Mark Anthony for the last year, as in the traditional global marketing manager sense.
Mm,
But every role I go into, I kind of feel like I have really good perspective of both sides, all stakeholders. So when I was from my experience in the likes of Teeling and the likes of Little Mill Company, I really understood what my clients needed from me in Bord Bia. I understood, what their actual challenges were on the ground, and how a small bit of insight or one conversation could lead to huge commercial growth for them. And I think I took it was kind of felt very personal then, because I knew I'd been in those businesses and I knew what those wins could do. So yeah, definitely I think it was kind of, it's all rounded up to make me really well rounded at what I do. And I think having that real appreciation for how important it is when, like you said about getting stuck in, when you do a job, just you want to do it and make it make sense. It's not just to have the sound bite or the clip to say, oh, we did this event. Like, does this event make sense, and are your stakeholders getting what they need to get out of it?
very true. Very true. Because I think sometimes something won't last the test of time if the stakeholders don't get what they want out of it. And
And
that's
that's
very
both
important.
ways. And I
Yeah.
think that I think I was really lucky in my role in Bord Bia to be almost an attaché between the industry and the likes of the
Mm,
retailers. And what I learned very quickly is it's much easier to go to a retailer with a value offering than go to a retailer and ask them to buy something off you and get nothing else out of it. So when I in Bord Bia I really realized, and from my experience with Teeling, that they were always education focused. They were, they know about the art industry, but they were passionate about teaching everybody else. And I realized that that's what was missing in the US market. They love Ireland, and they have obviously huge roots in Ireland, and everybody meets you and they want to tell you about their trip they went, or their grandfather been from there. But the true understanding of what maybe Irish products were, what made Irish whiskey was missing. So I kind of devised this, we devised this education program called the Spirit of Ireland. And we were able to go to the retailers and say, we'll actually just train your staff. It's not going to cost you anything. I just need you to get them to show up. But then they've got to win out of it. They've got to 30 or 40 staff maybe in one session that have been trained. They're experts in a product. They got a fun day out because, you know, we didn't do death by PowerPoint. We did tastings, we did fun. We had, and then the retailer is saying, oh, you've given me something there. You're a partner to me now. You're not just someone who's ringing me, asking me to stock something. And I think that's the biggest learning. Not everybody obviously can do to that extent, but, you know, going into those relationships with that partner mindset, I think it's hugely important.
I think it is, and building that relationship that it's more than just about, you know, selling a product in. It's given that value proposition. So I could imagine that was invaluable because the experience of selling the spirit, then the staff had it. So it was relaying much easier off the tongue, that educational piece. Because I can imagine like you're trying to sell something, an Irish drink product where they just might not know even where how that came about or the story of it or anything like that.
They quite often used to refer, and this is something I think most people in the Irish spirits industry know, like we're very much lumped in with Scotch and world whiskey. Even on the shelves, we
Mm,
sit kind of, there isn't usually a sign specifically for Irish, which would surprise a lot of people who aren't familiar with the market. So yeah, you need to create brand ambassadors, and I think that's with any products you're selling. It's not just, you know, spirits. Spirits kind of have that natural trade marketing focus because, you know, you have the bartender. That's an extra kind of line in the hand sell. It's obviously tougher with more traditional FMCG or meat or whatever. You know, you're kind of trying to get, you know, it's either the retailer or the end customer. But to have someone in, you know, that even it's just 3 points of an elevator pitch, they believe in your product. So when you're not around and someone walks into the store and says, I'm looking for X, they might be going maybe towards a more traditional category like a bourbon that they're familiar with. The retail staff can say, oh, yeah, but actually, I like that. But I actually tried this Irish the other day and I thought it was really great. You should try it. And that's a bottle
yeah.
sold for you. And if that
Yeah.
happens, you know, once a week in 10 of your main stores, your bottles are moving off the shelf. And that's hugely important, you know, and that's what keeps your brand alive because it's great to get these deals and it's great to marketing's very expensive. You know, a
It
full
is.
funnel marketing campaign is out of the reach of most startup brands and most SMEs. And but it's all the real, you know, the impact happens in store where you meet your consumer.
It's, you know, and that's a very, very important point for any drinks producer that's in Ireland at the moment that either is struggling to sell in the US or wants to get into the US because the value of exports has dropped and trying to get that back up. I mean, that in-house knowledge, how does somebody who's here in Ireland trying to get their product either increasing in sales or on the shelves in the US, how do they go about that when they don't have that ambassador over there in the US?
It's look, it's hugely challenging, and I think if there was a secret sauce, we would all be doing it. It's a massive investment, I would say, in it. But I would think my best advice to anyone would be: yes, you need money, but try and be as lean as possible.
Mhm.
And it's get that great partner, that great distribution partner. That's what you really need. You need a sales team that believes in you, and believes in your product and will do the work for you on the ground, will leverage the relationships they already have with the trade to get you in there. It does involve time in market. Everybody knows that as a producer, and that's what's tough. You know, not everybody has the resources to be there all the time and or to hire brand ambassadors. But if there's any way you can do that, I think that's usually important. Liquid on, it's anywhere you can get that liquid on lips to consumers, but building kind of those ambassadors for you. I think it's going into market with your distributor maybe 2 weeks per kind of geographic region, a year, a quarter. Don't overstretch yourself. Try and win really well in one area. Build
Mhm.
up your proof that you are a wonderful product that the consumer wants to buy, that you move off the shelves in certain retailers so that other retailers will pick you up, or those retailers who have you regionally will take you nationally. Um, it's those kind of it's a lot of kind of grit and elbow grease on the ground, but I would say it's locate your good partner, locate the correct geography you want to go into. You look at the likes of New York, California, Chicago. They're wonderful markets, but they're expensive. They're very, like, New York City is an incredibly expensive market to compete in. Don't need to be in New York City. You can be in Albany. You could probably sell twice as much in a second city. Like that's, it's Limerick versus Dublin. Um, and you can still get the same amount of bottles moved, but for half the price. And then you can start to build those relationships. Your distributor, should back you, but they also need to know that your product is selling and keeping the lights on. So the more bottles you sell in those regions, the more likely they are to take you into the likes of New York. Um, so that's what I would think about. I wouldn't just say, oh, New York is great, I want to be there. I would say, where can I really win? Where is there a gap? Where am I not going to try and go in and compete with other big brands? Because obviously you're still competing for space with the other whiskey and other, bourbon, Canadian, Scotch, and you're still competing for shelf space there. And I think that's the challenge. All Irish spirits producers know, we're still kind of all in it together. There's very few of us competing against each other at the moment. We're still all trying to, get that tide up and raise the category as a whole. But yeah, that would be my big advice. Try and go for those wins where you can win. Try and find that niche area with your distributor that you can win. You don't need to go into New York. You don't need to go into Chicago. And I think it's the time on the ground and building those excellent relationships with your distributors so they know you're an invaluable product in their portfolio and they really want to sell you. And that's as simple as spending time with them in market, meeting that great sales guy, taking them to lunch, maybe having a couple of great events in some lighthouse accounts. Maybe giving them a special, something that they haven't had before and then incentives, like incentives is big business in the US. There's a lot of gray areas of doing business, which most people will know. Legally you're not technically supposed to do any kind of bribery or paying or giving anything like that, but there are a lot of people are incentivized through other ways. So you'd see a lot of the brands globally will the tequila brands right now are bringing everyone to Mexico. If you sell so many cases, you go to Mexico. That's, everyone wants to go to Mexico, but everyone wants to come to Ireland too. And if you can, get that sales team and say, if you sell so many cases, I'll bring you over to Ireland. If you have a distillery, you can bring them to the distillery, but you can also bring them for an Irish, cultural experience. You can bring them to experience your brand, but also experience Ireland, dinners, the cliffs of Moher. We take all that stuff for granted, but some people that's a once in a lifetime they've always wanted to do. So it's just being really strategic. You can do that and that, it sounds expensive. It's not really. It's an investment of some plane tickets and some time to bring someone over, but they might have sold a few hundred cases for you in a market. So that's just all of that kind of building out that trade marketing strategy. I think that's key.
That's unbelievable. And you're right, you've said a couple of things there. The first thing you've said is, and which we would automatically think that New York, Chicago, Boston would be the place where we'd need to be selling our drinks. Automatically. It would be the first thing that would come into even my head. But it's so vast, right? And it's actually hitting points for nowhere, and proving that your product can sell in different areas to take it into the larger areas is key. Actually, I would have never thought about it like that. Um, I suppose, and getting to know that area because, like, in the few times that I've gone to the US, right, and I still remember the time I went to a place called Bakersfield. It's in California. It's like a different world. Like it, being there and in New York is like being in totally different countries. So I can imagine understanding the culture in different parts of the US is crucial to get that growth. So having that salesperson or spending time on the ground to see where that opportunity is, I'd say is pivotal. Be
Pivotal. And look, I'm not saying, the tastemakers are in New York and California,
mm,
the really cool bartenders who, look at the Dead Rabbit in New York. You look at what Jack McGarry has done there. It's been voted best bar in the world. It's considered kind of the lighthouse account now for Irish spirits in the United States. Um, but you can, I was gonna say not everyone can get into the Dead Rabbit. Jack is thrilled to have, he wants as many Irish spirits on his back bar as possible. But in
right?
that it's hard to move. You're not going to move the cases you need to move in just
Mm,
one account like that. But you can, there are, and also something to think about as well. US pre-COVID is a very different landscape now. So a lot of people who were big city people, who are cultured, who like a craft cocktail, they've moved. They either moved back to their hometowns because they could work remotely. They've started, the cost of living in the, I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment, is really high. So they've started, like places like Milwaukee and places like Minnesota have become cool. Like there's breweries, there's restaurants, there's very nice craft cocktail bars in all of those areas now. And there's, your consumer is in all those areas where, before everyone would have kind of just concentrated in those big cities. The consumers are in the second cities now. And they're there just as much and just as many numbers. It's just about, identifying those areas.
very interesting. Yeah. And I mean, when you think about it, the same principle has come to light here. After
Absolutely.
people are gone back to their home place, and so the same principle, but sometimes we don't think of it from that perspective. We don't, because, and I think that's where we come to, and what I'm really anxious to ask you about is your life in the US. Um, that must be some experience living over there. Did you love living there?
I love living there, and I go back. To be quite frank, I love living in Ireland, and I think we are, we complain a lot about Ireland, and rightly so in a lot of ways. It's gotten very expensive. It's tough for a lot of
Mm,
people, but it's a wonderful country. I think we're, as a culture, we're so well rounded. We're so warm. We have, as I said, we've great food. We've a really good standard of living. But there's an energy in the United States that and it's particularly in work. And obviously, the drinks industry is the second largest market in the world. So I really was exposed to a big industry there. But there's just, even when you meet people in work, and being Irish obviously gives you a little bit of an advantage. They're already a little bit more
yeah.
interested in you than they would if you were the average person. It's just brilliant. Like going to, like, the size of a trade show, the quality of execution of events, massive. Going out and meeting people, there's an energy. Obviously, you're in a different country every time you move to states. Like, you're in Florida, which is permanent summertime. It's tropical. It's a Florida's a tropical island attached to the United States, and culture is very different to New York. Um, but I absolutely loved it, and I just found that every person I met along the way, I built incredible relationships, and they were always so kind. They were always so warm. They were always, I could go to these small towns and have these. I like, to give you a really American example. I went to Wisconsin one time as a Teeling ambassador, and they got, if anyone's familiar with the Midwest, it sits on Lake Michigan, so it could snow overnight the same way the weather could change here very quickly, and you could dump 10 inches of snow in a couple of hours. You might not be, and that's just how it is. And I remember that happened, and I was with the sales team, and they were all so concerned about me as a person, and I wasn't used to snow. And, would I want to, like, there was a guy, and he was like, I know seems inappropriate, but, I have teenage daughters and my wife. Would you want to stay at our house? And if you don't feel comfortable coming there with me, my wife can come get you. Because I was quite young at the time now. I was only barely 23. Um, like
Yeah.
that's, and I know Irish people do that for you too, but it was just that level of, I was just some random brand ambassador that they'd sent up to train them for the day, and all of a sudden I was in it with them. So it's
You were under siege, dearly. You
yeah,
were,
you
but
have all of, and like I'm sure anyone who lived in the US has all those experiences. I had a lot of friends working in Bord Bia, and the same thing. They had wonderful, managers who were Irish American or just American, who'd have them all over for Thanksgiving or have them all over for dinner. that piece of it is phenomenal, but it's the relationships and it's the energy and the scope. Anyone, that American dream is real. Like there is room for everyone to kind of make their mark and get their piece. If you meet the right people and you have the right product and you get in the door, it's tough. Like I'm making it sound like a fairy tale. It's not. It's very expensive. It's very challenging. It's obviously overwhelmingly large, but yeah, incredibly positive. I love it, and I still love working with all of my American colleagues and contacts to this day. I'm still very much in touch with them. I was just at BarCon in Berlin, and it was wonderful to see all the people who I'd meet yearly at all the different conferences. And they, you go to dinner with them, and as if you see them all the time. So it's great.
That relationship piece and that, and I think culturally, the way we do business, and I've seen that quite a bit through my travel. And one place that stands out to me as being what you described there is when I used to go to South Africa. And like that, I used to go, and it wasn't easy at the time because the kids were small, but I had to go for work. But they treated me, I was treated like I was part of their family sometimes. I remember it was one bank holiday and I was over there and someone they brought me really into their own home and treated me like I was just one of their own. And sure, I was just buying product off them. I was buying, but it was just the way they treat people when they do business with them.
Yeah.
They treat them like they're their family. And I think being open to that, because sometimes culturally it's we're not used to doing that. But I think learning about the different cultures is critical to that, because you were young at the time. You didn't know what that might have meant to you. But then maybe when he said, "Look, I'll bring my wife and she'll bring you," I said, "Oh,
Yeah.
maybe that's all right." So
And I was very lucky because I'd done J1, so I kind of knew. I'd worked in
you knew.
restaurants, and I knew, like, I just think, and I do think that that is really important. Like, they speak English, and they are, they're Western, and they're like, we're not so different. We are at the same time, and just understanding how you speak to your customer. It's that level of. I remember even. I always laugh actually when I started, and the Americans used to think I was quite deadpan, like I wasn't very animated. But that's because Irish people really aren't. And I remember, and I think Margaret, you and I talked about this in Bord Bia. I remember then we used to do all our kind of our reviews and everything. And someone in Bord Bia said, and they mentioned the nicest way, they said, just, very high energy. And I thought, God, that's so funny to come from. And I obviously have been Americanized a little bit, but like they really feed off energy. So as an
Yeah.
Irish person, it is something as simple as any small connection. If they like golf, talk about the fact that you live near a golf course, whether you like golf or not. Just,
Yeah.
it's a lot of it is just hamming up any little bit of commonality you have at all, and just listening to them talk about going to Ireland, which I know can be a cliche at times, but I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful to we have that asset that people just say, I love coming there. I've always wanted to come there, and just really appreciate that. So I think that's huge.
Yeah. It's a big one. All right. If we go back to the exports of drink and the challenging year it had last year, what do you think was the effect on that? Like, what do you think caused that? And how do you think it's going to look for this year, say, and onwards, to give maybe the producer hope of growth in the market?
I look, it's been a really tough few years in the US. I think from a cost of living perspective, consumer sentiment is down, inflation's been up, the cost of groceries. Do you hear that? That was the theme of the whole election this year. The average US consumer is feeling it a lot more than they were before. And I think that that's impacting their purchasing. So they were obviously premium spirits and Irish spirits have been benefiting from premiumization the last few years. People don't have that extra money to spend right now, so they're going back to the white label, or they're trading down. And I also think there's a couple of other combinations. Yes, you can talk about Gen Z, and they're drinking a little bit less, and globally people are drinking a little bit less. I think wine consumption, the global wine industry is down at its lowest in 27 years. So it's been felt along all markets. And I think Irish whiskey sales, like 91% of what we were sending to the US, was in kind of that premium category. All of that's where everyone's feeling the effects, because if you feel the drop in that purchasing. People have invested in their businesses. They've built distilleries. They've, it's not a quick game. Your stock is sitting there for a while. I don't think the premiumization is going away. I don't, I'm not going to sit here and tell everyone like 2024 is going to be amazing, but I don't think the industry is doomed. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens this year in the US. I think that will change a lot. But inflation is going down. There has been a little bit of stockpiling as well, still. So there was a lot of stockpiling in COVID and after COVID with a lot of the distributors, and they were kind of unwilling with the cost of credit and everything else to take on any more stock, that they weren't sure. But I definitely still think there's absolutely space, and not just in the United States. There's space in plenty of other markets for Irish whiskey and Irish spirits. But it is unfortunately, we're kind of in there's a lot of different factors at once. There isn't just one thing that's causing this.
Yeah, and it just shows you because of the length of time that product goes in the market, the effects of COVID are still
Yeah.
affecting the industry. So, and there's a lot of different things with the inflation, and because we're in that premium end, it's still having that effect. Do you think there's any brands out there that are kind of doing a sterling job at managing that at the minute? Is there anyone that strikes to your head that's kind of pulling it out of the park altogether
Harry.
amongst the obstacles?
Um, Look, I think all of our producers in Ireland they're doing an incredible
Mm.
job. Someone I call out because they're just very different is Lost Irish, and I think Tim Hurley. A lot of people can learn. Everyone knows and loves Tim Hurley, I'm sure. Anyone not familiar with Tim, he was national ambassador with William Grant. Um, for Tullamore Dew in the United States for 10 years. So I was never worked with Tullamore Dew, but Tim always mentored me and he always looked after me. And then we had then we became partners when I went into Bord Bia and he became a client of mine. But he has really gone into the market he's obviously at the opposite end. So actually his business is based in the United States and it's all about being on the ground. So it's him, he's got two other wonderful ambassadors, and they're pulling all the time. So they're kind of the proprietors on the ground, and yeah, it's fun to see. It's kind of been done a different way, but that's from insights Tim has learned being in the market, and also very luckily that he can, he has that visa and he can be there. Outside of Irish, I just think there's so many to look at who are kind of going into the non-alcohol space. Athletic Brewing Company, I remember they're a non-alcoholic beer. They increased their sales 500%. And by early 2024, like they got bought out and they actually are the number one beer in US grocery now. Heineken,
Oh,
they passed out Heineken and Budweiser. They taste really good. Their branding
yeah.
is nice. It's simple, but they taste really good. They obviously had the right conversations at the right time. They had an excellent team behind them. But I wouldn't even say I'm a beer drinker. I'd like a pint of Guinness, but I don't tend to buy beer. And so non-alcoholic beer wouldn't be what I'd gravitate towards.
Mhm.
But if I saw one in the fridge, I'd pick it up, which I think is a good endorsement of any product.
That is, yeah, that
I
is.
think,
Yeah, that is. And it's funny that you said it's outbeat two very strong brands. And I think, and I'm wondering with the way the trend of, I don't know whether it's a trend or what way it's going, but the sober curious are people that, because I've spoken to many people of my own age, they just can't take a hangover anymore. They don't want it. They can't do their run in the morning. They can't get up and get the kids' activities. As we get older, we're not able to handle it. So what do you think of that? Or do you think there's an opportunity for that market? Like when you say you're not a beer drinker, but you'd pick that up, you know?
oh yeah, I think the same conversation was happening around the legalization of cannabis in the US, and that's kind of had the same impact. So I
Oh, yeah.
think the way people are drinking is different. I don't think the alcohol, you see a lot of people saying, oh, the alcohol is dead, people are moving away. Of course it's not. There's plenty of markets who are only starting. Look at India, look at a lot of Asia, they're only really starting. Their culture is only changing and moving towards alcohol consumption the way we do in the West and cocktails and everything else. I do think, Gen Z, yes. But everyone talks about Gen Z. We give Gen Z a lot of credit. We were all the generation who were going to do
Sure.
something at one stage, and the world hasn't
Yeah.
shifted that dramatically. We still live in the same world. Everyone says, "Oh, when I was your age, I did this or that." So Gen Z are impacting. Definitely, they drink less. And my sister, I look at her now. She's Gen Z. She's living in Vancouver and she spends her weekends hiking and doing all these outdoor activities. Now she does. I know she drinks and she enjoys going out, but we weren't hiking when we lived in Chicago when I was her age. I can tell you that. So it definitely is a different mindset. There is great alternatives out there. So I think if you want to feel like an adult and have an adult beverage, whether you're sober curious, you don't drink at all, or you have you just have a reason for not partaking, I think it's great to have the options. Obviously in Ireland, I think I feel it even actually having come home. It's so more socially acceptable to just not really drink, and everyone's very relaxed with it. I think there was the whole joke 10 years ago, there'd be whispers if you didn't have a drink. Whereas now it's like, oh yeah,
It's,
you're have a
it's
Guinness
true. Yeah,
zero.
yeah, it's true. No, and it's great, isn't it, that that culture is
Of
shifting?
course. But I also think there's a term that they're using now called zebra striping. And I think that that is where kind of the real opportunity is. So people are, they might have a drink, then they might have a non-alcoholic drink, then they'll have another drink. So it's kind of, maybe if you're at a wedding and
Yeah,
an Irish wedding, you're 2 o'clock onwards, you're kind of out for the day.
yeah,
It's, that's, you might have a Guinness, you might have Guinness Zero, you might have a non-alcoholic cocktail, and you might have wine with dinner. And I think that that is kind of allowing, that's the moderation piece coming in. So it's kind of similar to when you look at meat and the flexitarian movement. I think it's you can look at that, it's kind of coming from the same place. It's people really trying to be a little bit better. They're trying to they're taking on kind of all that medical advice and they're reading a lot more and they're more engaged in their health. But they're not going to just completely switch altogether. But I also think then, yeah, look, there's the public health movements and everything else. So I think it's a mixed bag, but I certainly, I think it's reshaping the alcohol market, but I think there's still opportunity for everyone. And, the lower no is there, but also less but better is still there. So people might not drink as often, but they might buy a nicer whiskey to enjoy. They might go, and they're more engaged, the consumer. Everyone knows that after COVID, they spent so much time, there was very little to do. So they started to pick up the backpacks and read them. They started to be engaged in product stories. So now you're dealing with a much more informed consumer who's much more interested in your brand proposition. And so there is still that opportunity. Someone wants to pick up a brand that has a really nice story and they're a lot more emotionally engaged. So I definitely think it's changing, but it's not, it's
yeah.
not
And like, I think people are more, they want more of an experience now.
absolutely.
And even for eating out, the same thing applies, that if you're deciding to eat out tonight, you want to eat out in a really nice spot with good food rather than have a bad experience, because people are probably, that's become more important, because we only have so much to spend every month. So what you do spend it on, it needs to be really good quality. And another point I always think is great, and even when it comes down to ourselves, like, when you shared your story, you come from a farm. I come from a farm. That makes us into who we are. I think our own stories of where we come from and where that brings us along our journey, people engage with that. Even people engage with you as, oh, you came, I mean, and I even found kind of in the last few years, just sharing that a bit more to develop my own business has helped me, which
Yeah.
it just shows you, like, you do. And a lot of people now have, created distilleries on farms, breweries on farms, and they've done that as another avenue of income, which I think is fantastic for the tourism industry as well. Like,
So you took the word. I was about to say experience economy is where it's at now.
yeah,
And that's with everything, like obviously you talk about the distilleries and there's someone you can go to just how many distilleries we have in Ireland. We're into 40 up to high 40s. And every one of them is different. We have our urban ones here in Dublin. You go across to the west and you have the likes of Louise McGann, who is bonding on her beautiful farm in the middle of County Clare, and you're just there, and the horse is there with the barrels, and it's beautiful. You go up,
Oh,
then you can go down, you can go and see the likes of Middleton, and they're really vast stills. You can go, I could name them all if I started, but there is something there for everyone. But that's also linked to, you're going to outside of Dublin to lovely little towns where there's these restaurants. I think you and I were talking about, you can get a great cup of coffee pretty much anywhere in Ireland now. Like,
okay.
that's a testament to how far we've come with experience. And maybe that's all people are spending on. They might only want to spend that extra €5 and get that coffee, but it's the experience that you're giving people. Or yeah, they're maybe going out to less fast casual dining, and they might just say, I'm going to go for a really great dinner this month. Or I think all of that, and you see that as well with what Tourism Ireland are doing. And IBEC, I know, have hired someone. They have a whole department now that is experience. It's experience economy in with the drinks and the food. And I think that that's hugely important that we capitalize on that, because that's what makes us really special.
It is, and I think that's something that that at next March forum we're going to go into, because I mean there's so many different trade avenues food and drink can get into, but I think that's one that we just need to tap into a little bit more, because when visitors come into the country, they're on holidays like us all. When we go on holidays, we seem to forget about what's in the bank. We'll worry about that when we get home. So why wouldn't we capitalize on that? So I think that's something we're going to educate on next March as well at the forum. I have to ask you, since your time in the US, and we've had a lot of chatter about, Donald Trump and what he's going to do. Do you have any idea on what you think he's going to do? Because you lived there in his last reign. And
I actually moved to the US the morning Donald Trump was announced as president the first time. So I actually, myself and Donald Trump have had about the same amount of
you've
experience.
had the same amount
We've
of,
had the same reign in the United States.
very good.
I would say, look, people are concerned, and they're right to be concerned. I think the biggest concern is the fact that you don't really know. It's not a regular presidency, shall we say. He's famous for not kind of going with the status quo. There's concerns about tariffs. We felt tariffs the last time with Boeing, with the Irish creams in 2019. There's 25% tariff put on goods like that. Bailey's and actually Kerrygold as well felt that there could be, those potential trade wars again. What's going to happen to the economy? Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? How is that going to affect all the premiumization and everything we are just speaking about? I know the industry, the likes of Discus, the Distilled Spirits Council of America, and I know IBEC will be working alongside them, are trying to get exemptions for the likes of geographical indicator goods such as Parmesan, Irish whiskey, things like that. I would say it's very much there could be opportunity too if I was to turn it on its head and say he's calling out Mexico this week and Canada. So that's Canadian whiskey and tequila, two spirits that Ireland are, fighting hard to get space against. If they got tariffs and we didn't, could that be an opportunity? Absolutely. But it really comes down to what happens with him as a personality as well. Who does he kind of wake up in the morning and decide it's a problem? Or it's tariffs is all you're hearing at the moment. How much he'll be allowed to do that will be one thing. Who he'll decide he wants to do that to will be another. And then there's immigration policy, there's everything else. I think uncertainty is the bottom line. But I think the one thing I would say, and I think everybody here is well aware, it's not, I think we might get a certain news angle here in Europe. In the US, it is, it's very much a divided community. And a lot of people do think he's the best option and best president. And I think a lot of our business partners might feel that way as well. So, that's something, you kind of just have to respect their decisions then. And, it's their country, they live in it, they voted. So it's about going over and, being really mindful of that as well, that we get a kind of certain narrative on our news here, but it may not be the narrative on the ground everywhere in the United States. And that's just something I would kind of advise people to be really mindful of as well as you're kind of doing business. I'd avoid the conversation altogether if I could, but I would nod and smile otherwise, because I think, it's very easy for us to sit over here and have opinions. We do live in quite a, thankfully, our country's quite level on that front. But yeah, that's just a point I kind of always, and it was something I was always told and taught when I was moving over there, that
Yeah. It's a good point because the narrative we are shown here is not, and to be respectful of who the US citizens voted in,
yeah,
um, because they are living in that country and they are, so I think that no matter what, where we go to do business, and I remember being in Brazil and they started having a conversation about the government in Brazil and the corruptness, and I just kept that like that because to be honest, one thing I didn't really know, and the other is that you don't know. There was numerous different people across the table that can have different views, and when you're there
absolutely.
trying to do business, really, you don't want to get into that political scene. Even here, Teresa, I think, to be honest, you have
No,
to be very
yeah,
careful in our own country with it
but
as we
we're
sit on
lucky.
election day.
It's not as a part of our culture to discuss it, so it's wonderful.
Yeah,
In work in the or and so it's normal in the US. It comes up. They had
yeah,
Thanksgiving this week, and kind of the social narrative was, the Thanksgiving table was going to be uncomfortable, because it is part of their social norm to
yeah.
discuss politics. But take your Irish advantage there and just play dumb. You don't know. It's not your country. Take
Yes.
your,
Oh no, it's
stick
true.
with that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, fantastic point. And tell us anyway, what are you up to at the minute? How do you support businesses at the moment?
So I'm kind of doing a wider range of projects. I obviously project management across the board. So I'm working with people to develop their trade marketing programs, education programs. I'm market entry strategy. I've category and retail offerings. So, I spent a lot of time, as we talked about, really building the value propositions for clients, for their partners, be it, like I said, the retailers but also distributors, importers. And I'm doing that on both sides. So I'm working with some US brands to help them come to Europe, and really kind of help them to understand. And a lot of that as well is kind of that insight, that market insight, that geographic insight, how you do business, compliance. I obviously spent a long time, that was a large part of my role the last couple of years. What does need to be on your label? Are you having an issue with the TTB? Is there someone that I can help you with? And vice versa, coming towards Europe. And then, yeah, I'm doing a lot of relationship management for people. So helping them work with their supply chain partners, identify supply chain partners. Yeah, kind of jack of all trades, but just really enjoying working with different
And I think
companies.
identifying good,
Sorry,
and I
Margaret.
think that supply chain partner piece is critical because many companies could meet a distributor and they promise and it doesn't deliver. So I think having someone with the experience of yourself to know, okay, that's a good partner, that may need a bit of work. I think that that point of contact or that expertise is crucial to the success of that product being successfully sold in that market.
Absolutely. And also, I think it's just, I can offer people something that they may not have, which is time. So I have the experience to do all this, but they're also, majority of brand
Mhm.
founders and owners, and they're doing 700 things. So if I'm coming in there and I'm taking that experience, but I'm also, taking on a project and doing it for end to end for them and just managing it overall. And I think that's been something I'm really noticing, that I'm really bringing value. I'm someone that has done it before. They can trust me, and I'll tell them the truth, because I think that that's really important. I want to go in, I want people to be successful, and I want to take my experience and help them to do that. And if I feel, if they say, oh, we're working with this trade partner, I might say, oh, that's great. Let's ask them this question.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
brilliant,
yeah,
brilliant,
yeah,
brilliant.
really enjoying it, I have to say, which is the biggest piece. Just to have the opportunity to work with such an array of companies is just we're so lucky. We've so many bright minds and brilliant brands in Ireland. So yeah, couldn't.
And that's what keeps us in it, isn't it? That's what keeps us
Yes,
in
that
it,
is what keeps us in it.
is the love of it. Teresa, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today, sharing your experience. Um, and you actually are quite an energetic, bubbly person. I love talking to you. You give me plenty energy. So I wish you the really best of luck, and thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks a million for having me, Margaret. It's a delight to be here.